Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the story of Senor Alex Fuel,
Hmm.
a content creator who had some really interesting experiences online, went through some really specific things that I
Yeah.
think are worth examining.
Fascinating.
And for those listeners who aren't familiar with him, he had a couple of gaming channels,
Right.
Redemption Games and The Guru of Games,
Yes.
and he was very successful.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is, like,
And he walked away.
yeah, he deleted them.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at, like, what led to that and then
What's next?
yeah, and then what he's doing now.
It's a fascinating trajectory, I think,
Yeah.
because it really highlights that emotional roller coaster that you see with so many content creators these days.
Absolutely.
You know, the highs and lows of putting yourself out there.
Right. And it's especially within the gaming community because,
Oh, yeah.
there's a
Yeah,
certain
and
level
there's
of,
not
intensity and passion.
For
and
sure. Yeah. And sometimes it tips over.
can sometimes go in a negative direction.
It can get toxic.
And that's what's interesting about what happened with Senior Alex Fuel
Right.
is that it wasn't just your typical, like,
Right.
oh, people are being mean online.
It wasn't just random trolling.
Yeah.
It was very targeted. It was very specific.
And it seemed to be like he called them trolls, but it seemed very deliberate.
Very deliberate, and there was this element of using his own persona against him.
Yeah.
Like they used his good guy image to kind of
Undermine him.
undermine him, yeah,
Yeah.
and make it seem like he wasn't being authentic.
And you can tell in the source material, like, it really affected him.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, this was clearly something that was really difficult for him to go through.
This was more than just a hobby for him. You
Yeah.
know, this was his creative outlet. This was his connection to a community.
Right. And I think that's what's important for people to understand,
It's huge.
is that for a lot of content creators,
Yeah.
that online community is their community.
Especially for people who maybe don't have as much of an in-person community.
Exactly.
That online world becomes their lifeline in a way.
It's their whole world.
Yeah.
And so to have that
Got that attack.
be attacked and,
Yeah.
and deliberately kind of like,
Picked apart
yeah,
by people who are intentionally trying to cause harm.
yeah,
That's got to be devastating.
it's brutal.
Yeah.
It really is.
And it makes you think about like
It does.
the responsibility that comes with having an online platform.
Yeah. It really makes you think about, like, what leads somebody to actually hit that delete button.
Right. Like that's a huge step.
That's not just like, I'm taking a break.
Yeah. It's not just logging off for a little bit. He wiped it out.
It's gone.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to the intensity of what he was going through.
Yeah.
You know, when your online space becomes so toxic that you feel like the only option is to completely erase it,
Yeah.
that's a really difficult decision to make.
And it speaks to that, like you were saying, that emotional roller coaster. Like, that's a low point.
It's a crash.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about like, you know, the long-term effects of this kind of online hate.
Right. Like, where do you go from there?
Exactly. How do you rebuild after something like that?
Yeah. And in his case, he decides to try something completely different.
Right. He jumps into affiliate marketing.
Which is interesting because, like, on the surface, it's still online.
It's still in that digital world, but it's a different beast.
Totally.
Yeah, content creation is all about like, you know, authenticity and connecting with your audience.
Passion.
Passion, yeah,
Like, you have to really love what you're doing, I think, for it to come through.
exactly. And I think that's where he was coming from with his gaming channels.
For sure.
But affiliate marketing, it's a lot more about, you know, driving traffic and conversion.
Yeah, there's more about the numbers.
Exactly. And that could be a tough transition for some people.
And it sounds like it was for him.
Yeah, he talks about feeling unfulfilled, like something was missing.
Even though, like, on paper, he was successful.
Right, he was making it work, but it wasn't feeding his soul in the same way.
Yeah, he was missing that connection.
That passion, yeah.
And I think what's really insightful about that period for him is that it forced him to really examine, like,
His values.
yeah, like, what did he actually want out of his work?
Mhm.
Like, what were his priorities?
Was it just about the money or was it about something more?
And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, we've all had those moments where we question if we're on the right path.
Whether it's our career or our relationships or whatever,
Yeah.
sometimes you have to take a step back and reassess,
And sometimes that means walking away from something that looks good on paper,
even if it's successful, even if it's what you thought you wanted.
even if everyone else thinks you're crazy for leaving.
Exactly. It's about being true to yourself and what you value.
And that's a powerful message, I think.
It is.
And it's something that Senor Alex Fuel embodies in a lot of ways.
And it's what makes his story so compelling because he doesn't stop there. He's not afraid to keep searching for that thing that lights him up.
Right. He's not afraid to reinvent himself and try new things.
And that's what leads him to his next chapter.
the StoryFuel podcast.
Exactly.
And that brings us to his podcast, the StoryFuel podcast.
Right. A total shift.
It is interesting, though, how he kind of goes from like super visual, gaming videos to just audio.
Yeah, but you can tell he still has that storyteller's instinct.
Oh, totally.
Like he knows how to keep people engaged, even in a different format.
And he's not just talking about games anymore, right?
No, he's branching out, talking about all kinds of stuff, personal stuff too.
Which I think makes sense, after everything he went through.
Well, for sure. It's like he's processing all those experiences through his content.
Yeah, and maybe even trying to help other people who might be going through similar things.
That's the thing about sharing your story, right? It can resonate with people in ways you don't even expect.
And it takes guts to put yourself out there like that, especially after getting burned like he did.
Absolutely. But it also shows growth.
Yeah.
Like he's not letting fear hold him back anymore.
And that part in the source material where he says he hasn't ruled out going back to gaming one day.
I know, right? It's like he's come full circle.
It really shows a different mindset than when he deleted everything.
Totally. He's not afraid of it anymore, but he's also not rushing into anything.
Like he's learned his lesson about boundaries and what he's willing to deal with.
And imagine if he streams the podcast on Twitch.
Whoa.
How meta would that be?
So meta.
Talking about overcoming online negativity while streaming live on Twitch.
That's wild.
It's like proof that you can go through something really tough and come out the other side even stronger.
It's a good message.
Yeah, you don't have to let the bad experiences define you.
You can learn from them and grow and move forward.
And find new ways to do what you love.
Exactly. So for everyone listening today, even if you're not a gamer or a content creator, what can we learn from Senior Alex Fuel's journey?
I think the biggest takeaway is the importance of finding your voice and using it.
Even when it's hard.
Especially when it's hard. Because you never know who needs to hear what you have to say.
And that sometimes walking away from something is the best way to move forward.
And that success isn't always a straight line. There are going to be bumps in the road, detours, wrong turns.
But it's about finding your own path and being true to yourself.
And that's what it's all about.
This deep dive into the story of Senior Alex Fuel has been a wild ride.
From gaming to affiliate marketing to podcasting.
He's shown us the power of reinvention and the importance of staying true to yourself.
Even in the face of some pretty intense adversity.
So the next time you're facing a challenge online or offline,
remember Senior Alex Fuel's story.
And remember that you have the power to choose your own path.
And write your own story.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.